She 3D printed a Neolithic skeleton for her thesis. It started answering questions. Every answer cost years. There is a particular hubris in reconstruction, the anthropologist's impulse to look at fragments, bone and ash and trace mineral, and insist on wholeness. To assemble from scattered pieces an entity that was, at the moment of its last coherence, already trying to leave the world behind. We call it scholarship. We call it the recovery of the past. The past has its own opinion about being recovered. Riley Cho spent 14 months building her reconstruction. 14 months of careful, scrupulous, technically flawless work, assembling a complete Neolithic skeleton from 3D scanned data and printed polymer. She wanted to know what this person had looked like, how they had moved, what the curvature of their spines said about the life they had lived. The skeleton, once complete, had other priorities. It could not lie. This is the detail that sounds almost like a virtue, and which is, in the context of what the bone oracle actually is, and what every correct answer costs, one of the most terrible things I have ever had occasion to say about anything. It cannot lie. It has never lied. And Riley asked it one question too many. The bones had come from a site outside Çatalhöyük, recovered during a licensed excavation in 2019, and catalogued by the joint Turkish-British team that had spent 3 seasons in that area. They were approximately 8,400 years old, a complete adult skeleton, sex indeterminate by the standards of the available bone density analysis, buried in a manner that had caused some quiet debate among the excavation team. Not in the standard subfloor position common to the site's burial practices, but standing upright in a sealed clay chamber in the northeastern corner of what appeared to be a communal building, arms at the sides, face to the east. The excavation's physical remains were in Istanbul. The 3D scan data was publicly archived. Riley Cho, a doctoral student in biological anthropology at the University of Edinburgh, had downloaded the dataset in her second year with the intention of producing a physical reconstruction for the practical component of her dissertation on Neolithic mortuary variation. 14 months of polymer printing, assembly, reinforcement, and the particular painstaking craft of reconstruction had produced, by March of her third year, a complete skeleton standing in the corner of her lab space. 162 centimeters, posture slightly forward in the manner common to people who spent significant time in stooped labor. The skull's facial structure mapped from the scan data onto the polymer with a quality of fidelity that her supervisor called outstanding, and that Riley found, privately, more than she had expected. There was something in the skull's proportions, not a face exactly, but the negative space of one, that produced a response she attributed to the anthropological uncanny valley and did not examine further. She discovered the tapping on a Thursday in April at 11:43 p.m. when she had been in the lab alone for 4 hours finishing the notation for her methodology chapter. The lab was quiet. The skeleton stood in the corner. The tapping was the sound of one finger bone, the proximal phalanx of the right index finger, meeting the metal pole that formed part of the skeleton's support armature. Once, then, after a pause, twice. Riley stood very still for a long time. She told herself, been alone in the lab for 4 hours. She was tired. The building was old and produced sounds at night that were fully explainable by differential thermal expansion. She went back to her notation. The tapping came again, once. She turned around. The skeleton stood exactly as it had. She approached slowly and looked at the right hand with the careful attention of someone who has spent 14 months knowing exactly where every bone is. The proximal phalanx of the right index finger was approximately 4 millimeters from the armature support. It had not been 4 millimeters from the support when she assembled it. It had been flush. She said aloud, feeling completely absurd. "Was that you?" 1 tap. The system was, in the occult taxonomy that Riley was not, at this point, consulting, a form of binary oracle, possibly the oldest documented form. The entity that had inhabited the bones at the time of the original individual's death had been sealed in the standing burial specifically to preserve it, not as a superstition, but as a practical decision made by a Neolithic community that had been using the oracle for 4 generations and understood both its function and its cost. The sealed chamber, the eastern facing, the upright position, all practical operational requirements for maintaining the oracle in a dormant but accessible state. The entity could answer yes or no. It could not give false answers. This was not virtue, but constraint, a feature of the binding in which it existed that permitted only the transmission of accurate information. Every accurate answer consumed, from the lifespan of the person who had asked, a number of years equal to the number of years the oracle had been dormant since its last use. It had last been used in 1987 by a Turkish archaeologist named Dr. Yusuf Arslan, who had found the clay chamber 3 months before the bones were formally excavated, had asked the sealed remains 3 questions in the dark of a southeastern Turkish site, and had died of a rapid onset heart condition 12 days later at the age of 51, leaving no documentation of the encounter. Before Arslan. 1962. Before 1962. 1934. The intervals grew longer the further back you trace them, and the costs correspondingly larger. The bones had been dormant for 37 years before Riley assembled them. Riley's first question had cost her 37 years. She did not know this. She asked it casually, still feeling absurd. "Is there something in you?" 1 tap. She was 26. She was now, in the actuarial reckoning of the Oracle's accounting system, 26 with 63 years remaining rather than the statistical expectation of 93. She should have stopped there. She knew, something in her knew, that the appropriate response to a skeleton in a university lab producing accurate binary communication was to leave the lab and make calls to several different people until the situation was someone else's problem. She knew this. She stayed. She asked 31 questions over the following 6 weeks. She was systematic and scientific about it, which she would later, in the diminishing amount of later available to her, reflect on as either an appropriate response to a genuinely unprecedented empirical phenomenon or the most catastrophically wrong application of methodological rigor in the history of anthropological research. She asked about the burial, about the community, about the entity's origin, its mechanics, its relationship to the individual whose bones it inhabited. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no. She developed a protocol for more complex questions using sequential binary options. She filled 3 notebooks. The skeleton answered every question accurately, which she verified where verification was possible, and which was possible more often than she had expected, given the questions she was asking. She did not notice the tiredness until the 5th week, an exhaustion that was not the exhaustion of overwork, but something beneath it, a fatigue that seemed to originate below the cellular level. She slept 9 hours and woke tired. She slept 11 and woke more tired. Her supervisor mentioned, with a particular careful neutrality of an academic managing concern, that she looked thin. She was not thin. She had been 37 years old for 5 weeks. She noticed the gray in her hair on a Tuesday, looking in the lab bathroom mirror. Not a strand, a section at her left temple, fully gray. She was 26 years old and she had a gray section at her left temple that she had not had 6 weeks ago. She sat with this for a long time. She went back to the lab. She asked the skeleton, "Is answering my questions shortening my life?" 1 tap. "By how much?" The skeleton's right hand moved, the finger bones, with a precision she had assembled herself and now watched, with a horror she could not fully accommodate, tapped out a number on the armature support. 31 taps, 1 for each question she had already asked. She sat on the lab floor. The implications organized themselves with the particular clarity of someone who has been trained to follow data to its conclusions. 31 years taken. She had 62 years of statistical life expectancy remaining before the oracle's accounting, which now gave her 31. She was, on paper, still 26. She was not 26. She was the age the mirror was already showing her. She asked one more question. She knew she shouldn't. She had the notebooks. She had the data. She had enough. But she was a doctoral student in her 3rd year, and she was looking at the most significant anthropological discovery in the history of the discipline. And the question was the only one that mattered. And she could not ask it. "How do I stop this?" The skeleton tapped out a number, slowly, precisely. The proximal phalanx of the right index finger counted out the beats against the armature with a delicacy that was almost courteous. 32 taps. The cost of the final question was 32 years. She had 31 remaining. The skeleton raised its right arm fully, the first time it had moved more than its finger. The gesture was clear, unambiguous, the specific visual grammar of pointing at someone who was present in the room. Riley Cho looked at the skeleton of an 8,400-year-old Neolithic individual standing in the corner of a university lab in Edinburgh, pointing at her with the full extension of a reconstructed right arm, and understood the final piece of the thing she had been assembling for 6 weeks. The entity was not ancient. The entity had never been ancient. It had arrived in the bones from somewhere else entirely, from a future that was now no longer possible for her, from a version of Riley Cho who had continued the research and discovered, eventually, the complete ritual that the sealed burial was designed to transmit, and who had used it, and who was now, and had always been, inside the bones. The oracle could not lie. The oracle had always known. It had been answering her questions with perfect accuracy, including the ones she hadn't thought to ask. The handwriting in her notebooks was already beginning to look different, a little older, a little more resigned. She had 32 taps worth of time left, and the skeleton knew exactly what she was going to do with it. She had 31 remaining years and asked one more question. The answer cost her 32. This is the specific cruelty of binary oracles. They cannot soften. They cannot hedge. They cannot, by their nature, offer the small mercies of ambiguity that protect most of us from the full weight of what we're looking at. Riley Cho was a rigorous scientist, and the oracle was a rigorous instrument, and the combination produced a thoroughness that left absolutely no room for the comfort of uncertainty. She could have stopped at the first tap. She had every reason to leave the lab. And I want to be honest about the fact that the reason she didn't is not stupidity or recklessness or even the particular hubris I mentioned at the beginning. It was curiosity, the same curiosity that drives every significant expansion of human knowledge, the same quality that makes good scientists, the same quality the oracle had been waiting for in whoever would eventually assemble it, with the patience of something that has been in bones for 8,400 years and knows, with perfect accuracy, that the right person will always ask one question too many. What I cannot resolve is the twist, that the entity is Riley, a future Riley who completed the ritual and entered the bones, and then answered her own past self's questions, knowing the costs, watching her younger self take the notes that led to the completion. Did she do it willingly? Did she have a choice by the time she understood? The oracle cannot lie. It is never said that the truth is kind. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Ilara, and I am your whisperer. I'll be here, waiting for you next time. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. I want to hear your stories. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more. This has been Karma Quietly Whispers. See you soon.